Welcome to Narrator's Cut. Today we're going to show you a comedy romance movie called The Devil Wears Prada. Andy, a fresh graduate aiming to be a writer, arrives to New York and becomes an assistant to one of the city's largest magazine editors, the cutthroat and cynical Miranda Priestley. Watch out for spoilers and keep an eye on. Andrea Ondi Sash is a budding journalist who just graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in journalism. However, despite her disdain for the shallowness of the fashion world, she manages to gain a position as junior personal assistant to Miranda Priestley, editor-in-chief of Runway magazine, a role for which millions of girls would like to kill to be hired. In the hopes of finding work as a reporter or writer someplace else, Andy intends to be put up with Miranda's reasonable expectations and humiliating treatment for 1 year. Andy struggles to learn her new job for the first several weeks and feels out of place among her gossipy, fashion-conscious workers, particularly Miranda's senior assistant, Emily Charlton. In the aftermath of a dress trial meeting in which Miranda humiliates her in front of the whole team, she seeks creative director Nigel to learn the ropes of the fashion industry. She begins to dress fashionably and to put out effort for the role, satisfying all of Miranda's whims and fancies in the process. Problems occur in her relationship with her boyfriend, Nate, who becomes more frustrated as she spends all of her time at the beck and call of her new employer. Miranda gradually becomes aware of Andy's new look and increased devotion, and she began to delegate more responsibilities and more challenging duties to her. Andy slowly but steadily gets more glamorous, and she starts to identify herself with the runway mentality, although inadvertently at first. As the series progresses in her professional life, she progressively starts to outperform Emily. On the other hand, Emily is fascinated with the prospect of work as Miranda's assistant during Paris Fashion Week, and she begins to deteriorate physically as a result of her attempts at excessive dieting. At a charity event, she fails to reveal information on a visitor who is on his way to see Miranda, which causes him to be arrested. When Andy saves Miranda from an embarrassing situation, he is rewarded by being invited to take up Emily's position as Miranda's assistant during Fashion Week. However, when Miranda instructs Andy to notify Emily that she will not be traveling to Paris, Emily is struck by a vehicle and finds herself in the hospital. When Andy subsequently breaks the news to Emily, who is healing, Emily is understandably upset. When Andy informs Nate of the development, he is enraged that she has transformed into what she once derided, and the couple ends up breaking up. Andy learns about Miranda's imminent divorce from Miranda herself while in Paris. A little later in the evening, Nigel informs Andy of his acceptance as creative director with emerging designer James Holt. Andy also spends the night with Christian Thompson, a charming young writer who tells her that Miranda will be replaced as editor of Runway by Jacqueline Follett, who she finds appealing. Andy, who feels sorry for Miranda in her present predicament, seeks to warn her but cannot get through. On the other hand, Miranda reveals Jacqueline as a new creative director to Holt during a luncheon later that night, which leaves Andy and Nigel wholly taken back. Miranda later confesses to Andy in the vehicle that she was previously aware of the conspiracy to replace her and sacrifice Nigel instead to maintain her career. In response to Andy's displeasure, Miranda points out that Andy had done the same thing with Emily by stepping over her and agreeing to travel to Paris with her. Following their arrival, Andy exits the vehicle, throwing her mobile phone into the fountain at Palace de la Concorde, leaving Miranda, Runway, and the fashion world behind. Andy catches up with Nate later on and expresses his regret for what happened. Nate finally gets a new position as a sous chef in Boston, and the two of them are reunited. Andy gets interviewed and accepted to work from a large New York publishing firm the next day, all on the same day. The editor recalls how he phoned Runway for a reference, and he was informed Miranda herself that, although Andy had been one of the worst disappointments she had ever had as an assistant, he would be an idiot if he did not employ Miranda. Andy notices Miranda getting into a vehicle and waving as he drives by the Runway office building in the late afternoon. Miranda does not recognize or wave back, but she does grin, and she is safely situated into the vehicle. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed, and please leave a comment, like, and subscribe to the channel for more interesting movies to recap. Take care and see you at the next video!